I just finished Silksong with 100% completion. I am about to talk about Silksong. Probably a lot. So far the game keeps surprising me. And now they're happy! Woohoo! I'm really starting to get used to the combat.
More then, bring me more relics of the past. Records, seals, idols.
God, that's so fun. It's so fun to move around this game. If you didn't drop rosaries, I wouldn't have killed you, but you do. So I will kill you. I love it. Boss fight? Boss fight. No? Hi. Hi, buddy. Are you not boss? You're not gonna boss my ass? Alright, you really do not need me to tell you that Silksong is amazing and is definitely a Game of the Year contender. Thanks for that, the entirety of YouTube. Nor do you need me to tell you that Silksong is a wake-up call and a slap in the face to the AAA industry. Thanks for that, also the entirety of YouTube. Nor that it is a too hard, frustrating, and punishing of a game. Thanks for that, entirety of YouTube. What I have in mind for this video is something a bit different, yet relative to those three talking points. Expect light spoilers throughout, mostly related to gameplay elements, as well as early to mid-game footage. Any other spoilers would be preceded by a warning. That all being said, what do I mean by the title exactly? How is Silksong the... Wait. Oh god, this is where the thing happens, isn't it? I know this. There's a hard cut to a title screen coming soon and I feel it. I feel it. It's anxiety inducing not knowing when it's coming. Oh no. Wait. Wait. Ah! Silksong is by no means a perfect game, but a much more fitting and concise description would be that it is instead a perfect sequel. To clarify this point further, I think there's a considerable gap between what makes a good sequel and a good game. They do have quite the overlap as well, but there are aspects that makes one without the other. Going from 2D to 3D in a sequel can account for both, for example, if done right, positioning it nicely in the intersection. But expanding a game's design to have more world, more story, more enemies, more tools, and generally just more, would probably lead on to becoming a better sequel for the original, but could end up bloating the experience so much so that it makes for a worse overall game, even if those familiar feelings from the original are seemingly still present within it. Look no further than the discourse around Dying Light 2, especially on launch, which was on paper Dying Light but more, yet for lots of people, me included, it felt very off and was disliked by many afterwards. And vice versa. Changing up a franchise's whole identity and design foundations will lead to a conflicting sequel, if it could even be called that, regardless if the end result is a better overall game or not. Think of what Assassin's Creed Origins did to that series. It strayed so far from what made that series what it is, such that many fans were displeased, but it then brought so many new people to the franchise just because it was basically a really good game at the time. Obviously, being a great sequel makes you more likely to be a great game. Coming back on topic, this is exactly the case for Silksong. Let's start dissecting what makes it nail, pun intended, what many other sequels fail to, and how it immediately sets itself up as a good sequel, which is by actually playing on an important feeling of ours, and that is... I think there's no better starting point for us than the center of the whole game, which is the character you play as, Hornet. Hornet is the embodiment of the best main character for a sequel. First, she is neither an entirely new character being introduced, nor is she the same character from a previous game. She was already present in the first game and played a crucial role to the story there, so we were already familiar with her character. Yet she's also related to the former protagonist, known as the Knight, as they're literally siblings, and thus carries a similar outlook to her. Similar humanoid and a thin black figure with cloaks over their whole bodies, similar masks, and having a nail as a weapon. All that gives Hollow Knight players coming to this new game a sense of being right at home. To get a deeper look at this, let's see what the start of Silksong looks like compared to that of Hollow Knight's. Here we go. Both games begin with a poem that relates to the respective regions of theirs, and Hollow Knight starts with a simple yet intriguing cutscene that gives the world and the knight lots of mystery, and in turn, sparking curiosity for the player. In Silksong, obviously since we are familiar with Hornet and the game world beforehand, anything similar of a cutscene would feel odd and almost pointless. It will lose those similar feelings. Instead, it sees us still pulled by new mysteries through new unusual bugs with odd-looking sigils, and Hornet being locked up despite us knowing her powerful capabilities. Then the game actually starts, and I think all of us have felt it the moment we got control of the character. That yep, this is more Hollow Knight. The tight controls, the smooth animations, the feeling of the attack and the precise controlling of the jumps. We're at a moss area filled to the brim with greenery, very reminiscent of the original's green path. Looky here as well, a secret in the wall right next to where you start. Wonder where they got that from. Even many of the starting areas as enemies have pretty similar designs to that of the original, both in terms of their art and their behavior. But that's just the start. The familiarity is highlighted further from there on out. For one, the beautiful art style is still present here. You'll meet the same wacky bugs throughout your journey, and you're still a stranger passing through to them. And both main characters' origins tell us there's more to them than what meets the eye. And of course, it goes without saying, you're still in the same gameplay loop, fighting enemies and bosses, finding throughout the world equipment that helps you, and finding abilities that allow you to traverse and maneuver said world, and so on. These actions are still accompanied by similar sound effects, if not near identical to the original, while having the same incredible music that gives off just enough of the same vibe, but still manages to create its own identity. This is harder to put into words. The way I can better describe it is by telling you to listen to Hollow Knight and Silksong being played without their visuals, and you'd be amazed at how instantly recognizable and similar, yet unique from each other they are. The overall plot and narrative structure are largely unchanged here as well. There is yet another powerful entity controlling the poor bugs and turning them to fight you. The way things go is relatively identical. The way the world changes, how character arcs progress and conclude, and even the different endings and how to reach them. This might be the area where it can be seen as more of a detriment because a different type of story would have been nice, but hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. All those points signal exactly what I bet Team Cherry wanted us to feel in the first place. That this is more of what we loved. That this is more Hollow Knight. Being a familiar game to the original is sure nice for the pre-existing fanbase, but even they soon enough would feel a stagnant experience if that's all the game is, familiar. Probably questioning why they even bought this one when the original exists, sometimes even bouncing back to the original because all the sequel would have done is spark their nostalgia for that past experience. Luckily, Silksong never intended to rely solely on that emotion of closeness, where a lot of other sequels stick. It instead goes beyond it, utilizing what transforms a good sequel to a great one, even if it is a lot harder to design around. And that being... We'll do this similarly and start with Hornet and how she was built upon from the Knight. First of all, oh my dear lord, she speaks. And by speaks, I mean lets out incoherent words and a couple of grunts and shouts, but still, she speaks. And honestly, as weird as it sounds, the voice acting of her and the whole cast is impeccable. I mean, listen to this. Team Cherry yet again did a wonderful job at portraying characters' personalities through voiced, short gibberish words. Sometimes much more so than many full-on voice acting, I would argue. This is something born initially out of limitation, I would imagine, yet later it became an innovative spin on the implementation, and that's not the only place where it shows. Added to that, the fact that it fits surprisingly well for Hornet to have a voice and to speak to bugs in the world. Yet it just as well befits the Knight to not have any. Hornet is so eloquent, well-versed, and well-spoken, and has a tough, knowledgeable, and nobility-like, yet humble demeanor to her. It makes so much sense for her to communicate through words, and it is really the only way to portray her being articulate, since that kinda comes built in with the definition, you know? Yet for the Knight, well, I think we all felt that it is completely in character that he's quiet. Not in a shy way, neither is it in an evil or ill-intended way. It's just that when it comes to everything that's not an objective to him, he really doesn't give two fucks. But for real, he gives only as much care as is needed, is always oriented solely towards his goal, and everything else is just noise to him. And he's sure as nails powerful enough to be like that. At least that's my interpretation of him. And still, the contrast between them in terms of what they do fits just as well. The Knight, being much more in tune with Soul, sort of the magic equivalent within this world, has that as a seamless part of his kit. Consider his heal that requires him to charge in place, or how he has more range than Hornet with his spells, how these perfectly fit with his origins, and even the overall themes and elements of the story. The same applies to Hornet. Her natural affinity for silk, which by the way were shown in the first game, are woven, see what I did there? Not only in her interchangeable silk skills, but in the way she heals as well, which is faster and in one go, making for an overall stronger option to match the higher damage and overall risk of the game. The way both their kits complement how their respective games are designed is fantastic and can even be more immersive to the player. But let's just be clear, they do in fact play very differently, something that overwhelmingly defines Hornet from the Knight and Silksong from Hollow Knight. While not the only factor, it is the one where the moment you acquire it, you understand you're in for something different, the sprint ability. I cannot overstate how genius this single move is. It is a single button. If tapped, you will dash quickly in a direction, even in the air, and just like the first ability you get in the original, but if held down, you sprint and move much faster. So why exactly is this ability so brilliant? First, it plays so well into the Metroidvania elements of the game. Now you're backtracking, exploration, boss run backs, skipping through enemies, and everything in between can be done faster, which also gives the developers freedom in expanding the map size comfortably, which they absolutely did not hold back on. A massive map with bigger regions and more horizontal layouts and longer stretches, and even what feels like more enemies hanging about, as you can run past them more easily. Second, in both games, the main difficulty is managing your position within the screen. That's how you avoid attacks, maintain distance with enemies, and close in the gap for your offense. So, giving you more ways to maintain your position differently exponentially increases the complexity and thus options of your gameplay. That's done here by a toggle on your speed of movement in addition to the instant push of the dash. And now, every attack of an enemy can require you to position more precisely, and their openings can be even more minute and tight. This idea also goes for the cloak ability that lets you hover in the air, giving you more aerial control by allowing you a slower speed mid-air. Combine all that and Silksong will give you a difficult time overall, even if you were well practiced with the mechanics of Hollow Knight. Third, you can do this. Fourth, and most importantly, this single move that you get early encapsulates all the design principles that Silksong built on top of Hollow Knight and defines how it wants you to play. And that intended way is in being fast and aggressive. The opposite of the original's slow and methodical, kinda. Yet another similar change towards that is the sprinting attack, which launches you upwards on hit, perfectly positioning you to do an angled downward attack. Now, I've seen a lot of people dislike the angled attack in favor of what they're used to from the original, but in truth, it is yet another great evolution, and I might even go to say that people not using it might be struggling more as they're additionally fighting the game's intended way of combat. It is superior, in my opinion, to the regular down attack in three aspects. It has more range to reach your targets, it better ensures your safety by launching you further after a hit, and it seems more suited for how the enemies behave in this game. The last point will become clear when we discuss the disadvantages of this attack at face value. It comes down to two obvious points. It is initially harder to execute and land hits on your enemies than its older counterpart, and similarly, it doesn't theoretically allow for multiple hits in a row either. But if we change our perspective a bit, the first further challenges incoming Hollow Knight players and gives Hornet her own identity as the fast, zippy, and always on and off her feet character. While the latter wouldn't work on a good chunk of enemies anyway, as they would counter you if you stay above them for more than one hit. And the last notable part of your kit is something you earn by the mid-game that plays really well into this new style of combat, which is the Harpoon ability, the Claw Line. If you needed any further proof that Silksong promotes high aggressiveness, this ability is guaranteed to convince you. Now, no matter where the enemy is, whether they back away after an attack, or fly off into the distance, or any form of creating space away from you or denying it, as long as you're precise with the positioning and timing of the harpoon, that distance is no more. You're granted the ability to literally be permanently in attack mode, given you're ready for the risk and skill required, and again later enemies and bosses are designed with it in mind anyway. All these abilities have actively increased the overall tempo of how fast you can close onto and back away from your foes. And naturally, the tempo of absolutely everything got an increase in turn, for such is the way of Team Cherry. For the enemies, not only do they attack faster but more frequently as well, and the enemies that have one attack or behavior to their whole moveset are few and far between. So most of them mix up the way they strike and come at you as well. This helps keep you constantly on your toes, preparing to change the way you counter attacks constantly, and emphasizing the speed and rhythm of combat. More often than not, you cannot afford waiting for an enemy to finish attacking to get your hits in. Either you'll get one in at a time, prolonging the fight massively, or they'll just back away before you could close the gap, because that's something the enemies do now. Rarely do they simply approach you at all times and throw whatever attack they have. They now can back away and throw projectiles, or maybe perform a running attack at you quickly, or constantly jump around. This is incredibly apparent in the flying enemies of the game, which are now more prevalent than the previous game to further test your mastery of your increased mobility. Almost all of them fly around in patterns that I bet got you annoyed more than once. It's like they know you're going to attack and so they fly away, or immediately rush to you if you were trying to reposition or get a heal in. You'll also notice that most enemies hold weapons, throwables, or other equipment this time around, compared to those in Hollow Knight, which were a lot more beastly. They'd usually attack you with their inherent properties, natural claws, teeth, limbs, or otherwise, although a good chunk of them also had weapons. In the original, where enemies usually feel like they throw their all in their prolonged attacks, sometimes literally, which is matched by a longer attack opening provided to you, here in Silksong, the enemies are less savage. The line between the time they spend in attacking and not is much more thin. And this of course plays well into Silksong's faster pace, because weaponed enemies not only feel more intelligent and more likely to behave as I've been describing, but they give off more of a dual vibe instead, a fast back and forth, as well as making use of the parry mechanic, where your nail attack clashes with the enemies and nullifies it, and is satisfying to perform as well. That was already existent in Hollow Knight, but it didn't have much of a purpose due to the lack of weaponed enemies not being rewarding to that game's combat style. Here, that mechanic feels like it's basically an integral part of the game. Clear trend, as for everything we've discussed so far, that the game is promoting you to play aggressively. Obviously, these evolutions are compounded for the bosses, who have more moves, are faster, almost all of them cover all of the screen, and the ones who don't zip around it and teleport to you. Overall, I enjoy how they're evolved to fit this new playstyle for the game, but there was something special about Hollow Knight's difficulty design through simplicity. Think of the Cogwork Dancers boss fight in Silksong, reminiscent exactly of that, and the favorite of many players, me included, even if it is on the easier side because it doesn't match Silksong's pace. Yet another evolution from Hollow Knight is within the itemization and customization. By far the biggest here are the crests, each changing your whole moveset, the normal attacks, the downward attacks, and the sprint attacks, usually combined with tweaking the speed and reach of them as well, and sometimes even the way they function. For example, some people love the Reaper crest you get earlier in the game, because despite its strikes taking longer to come out, its downward variation is similar to that of the original, and thus the people who dislike the angled default immediately gravitated to it. Not to mention the fact that its heal bind has the extra benefit of generating additional silk compared to the original crest. These crests provide you with different slots for your equipment, which are now categorized and expanded in number, but this is more of a change than a refinement of the mechanic. And speaking of change, Silksong has its fair share of that. It adds brand new things from the original, so what's actually... I am glad the developers shook things up further by introducing new mechanics, concepts, and more to the game. While sure, they already had something great to build upon, this is like a nice final touch that solidifies Silksong's identity and sets it apart as something new, even if some of them are more experimental in nature. One common pattern that shows itself as you compare the two games is that here it's clear that Team Cherry were less shackled. Whether by budget, time, or other development limitations that they might have been facing in the first game, as well as their own skill of course, they were spreading their wings here. Case in point are the tools. You basically get these active secondary weapons as part of your equipment along with the existing passive effects ones. They are limited and consume a new resource, shards, that can be collected from enemies. I could definitely tell they were toying around a lot with this through various implementations because they were able to do so. Yet depending on how you play, the shard system might as well not exist for you, or tools as a whole for that matter. My favorite of them is by far the drill tool, which causes you to descend downwards and actually drill the enemy under you. Not only does it feel freaking amazing to land, but it also acts as an extension to your kit that integrates surprisingly well. There's more of them that can feel like that, but many just end up being more projectiles to use. There's also the wish system, a smart addition of the game that acts as both a tracker for certain NPC quests, as well as an additional push and reward for backtracking and re-exploring the regions of the game. An arguably better way to handle quests than those more cryptic and missable ones that were more prominent in Hollow Knight, although those still exist to some degree here too, and not all are executed well in my opinion. It still shows the team had no qualms about improving the commonly criticized points in Hollow Knight, and that's what counts. Another are the creatures and enemies actually, because god, who knew there could be so many bugs? The ones in this game aren't only more in number than Hollow Knight, but they are distinct as well. The overlap between the two games in the types or tribes of bugs is nearly non-existent. We went from mantises, moths and spiders to ants, frogs and mechanical bugs and whatever these shithead bags of green goo and bile water are, but they all fit greatly within this world. Farloom as a whole has a different vibe than Hollow Nest. Its themes focus on concepts of faith, but more importantly, culture, which is all throughout the game. The culture of pilgrimage, of the hunt, of royalty, and of organized government and control, and a lot more throughout. In Hollow Knight, the world was more in ruin, and less of its details were available to see because you come in as things are going really south. This shows best not in the world, but in its inhabitants. While Hollow Knight's NPCs were sometimes philosophical, sometimes lonely, and a whole lot of them were weird as heck, teetering on the edge of crazy, Silksong's NPCs are a lot less of that and more quirky in nature instead, which allows you to further understand where they're coming from and how they contemplate things. But honestly, on this point especially, both games do a really good job of presenting ideas and meaning in their own way, where maybe one speaks to you more than the other does. And in terms of the visuals, the world in Silksong starts out as very vibrant and full of life, and then other times getting darker and bleaker as time went on, both as the world changes and as you progress through the areas, and the game keeps swinging between both. While Hollow Knight was dark all throughout, both thematically and aesthetically, with it instead growing further and further into a chaotic mess by the end. This is complemented greatly by the variety of biomes in the regions presented here. We now get snowy peaks, lava-filled areas, smithies, different variations of greenery-filled areas, prisons, and a lot more. Each region is starkly distinct from the other, in contrast to Hollow Knight sticking mostly to rock-filled environments, with a lot of variety as well in that regard. Also, is it just me, or does Silksong have a lot more females this time around? Especially when Hollow Knight had more males. This is not only in terms of their gender, but it reflects more in their designs too. And in honesty, it works well with each of them. But don't ask me how, because I literally wouldn't be able to tell you. Just consider it vibes. Alright, those are some of the most prominent changes. But now is the time to truly end this bitch.
Sur le banc, Paris de la Simanette, Doni Poina Volinette, Pina sans Mima 17, Dana Fon sur le banc.
Within all of this discussion, what's most important is how everything I've mentioned integrates to form a cohesive experience within Silksong. How they're designed around each other and still being a familiar yet uniquely distinct version of Hollow Knight. Accomplishing each design individually is already no small task, but having them work together is what's so very hard to nail down. Many games do have sequels, but more often than not, they're viewed with a purely expansion mindset, where they add and change and quote-unquote improve, while Silksong includes to that the rarely found evolution mindset as well. What's wonderful is that Silksong can be played by people who did not play Hollow Knight. I don't think it's optimal, but the fact is that Silksong does not diminish its predecessor because they are distinct enough, as we discussed. Instead, it only enhances it by providing two versions of a beloved game that house different playstyles. That, in my mind, is what truly sets Silksong to be the perfect sequel. Those were a lot of words, huh? But I think Silksong deserves it, if you ask me. And it deserves that much recognition for its achievement. In an industry obsessed with more and more sequels that grow less and less daring, and instead continuing with what already works, but more, this game shows that a sequel can have the same magic as the game before it, but evolve it to craft its own identity, letting both experiences stand on their own 2 feet. All of that while still expanding content as those other sequels do. Just please don't take from from the part where the sequel takes 8 years to release, please. I hope this video shed some light on Silksong's achievements and can provide even the slightest value on how we perceive, analyze, and maybe even make sequels. If you've enjoyed it, go ahead and let me know by pressing the like button, and if you didn't, feel free to dislike instead. But in both cases, tell me what you think in the comments below. What are your opinions of Silksong? Any more examples of great sequels? And what do you disagree with me on? I look forward to all of them. But that's all from me, and I will see you in the next video.